Hey everyone, this is Theo from the Headphone Show. Today I have some quick impressions for you guys of the 64 Audio U18s. This is their latest model to hit the market, and it is an update of sorts to the original U18T, which came out a few years ago. They have added linear impedance technology, and I believe they've also swapped out some of the original drivers, but don't quote me on that. You can see that the width of the shell of the U18s is a little bit wider than any of their other IMs, which is what inclines me to say that this is the case. In terms of fit, I would say it's still pretty comfortable, but it also doesn't feel quite as secure as some of their other IMs in my ears. As usual, your mileage might vary and all that, as fit is 100% subjective. Hey, they might even fit better if you've got larger ears. Now, if you'll take a look at the faceplate of the U18s, it's pretty different from some of their other IMs. It has like indentations milled throughout the aluminum shell. According to 64 Audio, this design is inspired by quote-unquote natural formations. So I'm guessing they're talking about rock formations. Personally, I think this is pretty sweet, and it seems to strike a good balance between being understated and aesthetically pleasing. In terms of accessories, they're still not great, but I do think we're seeing some steps in the right direction. The U18s comes by default with the company's new silver premium cable, which is a big step up over the premium cable in terms of tactility. It's still got the janky memory wire, but I have taken the liberty of removing it on this particular sample of the cable I have. Okay, so if you're wondering why I have swapped sweatshirts, it is because I wanted to take my dog out and she slobbered all over it, so I had to swap. That aside, I'm going to be doing some listening off of the U18s now, and I will be doing it with my DX160. If you guys are ever interested in what reference tracks I am using, then you can go check out one of my written reviews, as I have a list at the end generally. But yeah, let's get right into it. Okay, so I have some good news and I have some bad news. The bad news is that this sounds nothing like the U18T. If you're hoping for a direct upgrade or you already own a U18T and enjoy it, then I think it's pretty safe to say that you can safely ignore the U18s. On the other hand though, if you're someone like myself who did not enjoy the U18T as much, then I think the U18s is going to be worth giving a listen. Whereas the U18T had more of a mainstream tuning in that it was quite mid-bassy and quite bright in general, I would say that the U18s sort of leans in the opposite direction actually. The closest point of comparison to my ears would be the U12T, and so I'm going to just compare them right now for your guys' convenience, as I'm pretty familiar with the U12T, as you guys know. Tonally, I would say that the U18s appears to have a little bit less quantity, going down past maybe like 50 or 100 hertz or so, and intangibly it doesn't quite slam or have as much texture as the U12T. Yeah, if you've heard the U12T, then you will know that it has like really good balanced armature bass. And what I hear here is more characteristic of most balanced armatures. The trade-off, of course, here is that the U18s does sound a little bit more controlled, maybe a little bit more tight in the way it articulates bass detail. The mid-range is interesting. It sounds like the upper mid-range has been raised a little bit, but at the same time, the pinna compensation, the amplitude has been brought down. So whereas the U12T has something of a lower mid-range tilt, it's a little bit warmer down there, I would say that the U18s is actually a little bit more balanced in the mid-range, but it's also not going to be as forward as the U12T. And if you've heard the U12T, you will know that it is not a forward presentation in the mid-range at all even. So the U18s is pretty darn relaxed going through the mid-range. I think treble might be a weak point of the U18s. I don't hear that lower treble peak at 5K hertz that the U12T has. And to top it off, I'm guessing it rolls off after 10K hertz before it comes back up at around 15 or 17K hertz for that Tia treble peak. So as a whole, it sounds darker to my ears, but at the same time, you still have that sort of zing in the upper harmonics. But if you're a older listener, I'm gonna guess that this is going to be a darker IM, and even for me, this is quite a dark IM in general, the presentation. But yeah, I think that's gonna do it for the tonal analysis, and in terms of technicalities, I think the first thing that stands out to me is whereas the U12T has something of a softness to transient attack, the U18s sort of leans in the opposite direction. It's a little bit more gritty, a little bit more micro-textured in the decay. The result of this, at least to my ears, is an extremely detailed presentation. I think the U18s can play at the top for detail no problem. For other stuff, I don't think the U18s has the same level of center image distinction as the U12T. You'll recall my comment about the upper mid-range of the U18s being brought up a little. Which is going to sort of take away from that center image distinction. Outside of this is not a holographic IM. It's not going to sound like 3D or anything like the Tia Forte or the Tia Trio. I think it sounds a lot more reminiscent of the U12T in the way it images. Very accurate spatial cues and just a fairly wide and open staging in general. The other difference that stands out quite a bit to me is dynamics, or more closely macrodynamics. The U12T has really, really good macrodynamics. Like if you've heard the Focal stuff, that is what the U12T is reminiscent of in terms of macrodynamics. It's just very punchy in the way it articulates dynamic swings. By contrast, the U18s sounds a little bit more gentle, maybe downwards compressed to the way it's articulating dynamic swings. I guess that could actually be a good thing if you're looking for something that complements that darker treble and more relaxed mid-range. But I'm going to say that my preferences skew towards the U12T in terms of dynamics. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for these first impressions. For now, I can confidently say that the U18s is a very solid IM. I would definitely take it over the U18T just on personal preference, although I'm not quite sure if it's going to knock the U12T for me out of that #1 spot. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the full review next week.